I played soccer in a men's league. I was the only woman who had ever played.
What?
Did you have to wear like a mustache?
No. You know what's funny is like, they were just like, wait a minute, is this even allowed? And there was no rule against it. So they let it happen.
Oh my God, you're Airbud. There's nothing in the rule book that says it.
I was a dog.
Hello and welcome to Cleopatra. I'm Lynn Molly.
And I'm Christy Bana, and this is a podcast where two Middle Eastern comedy queens dig up the funny from the first generation experience. Our guest today, oh my God, I'm so excited to introduce Miss Aisha Alfa. Yay. She is a comedian, a writer, an actress, a podcaster, a multi-hyphenate, and she's here with us today, and we're so excited to have her here. Yay!
Thank you guys for having me. I know nobody cares or nobody wants to know, but I just want you all to know that they're super gracious hosts because I am an hour late because I have no sense of direction. So thank you guys for having me. I'm very happy to be here. I can't wait to chat.
We're so excited to have you.
You're new to LA, so you're allowed to be
I'm
late
not new enough for this to have happened at all.
I'm new here on planet Earth, so that's okay.
More like where I'm coming from.
Don't worry, we're always renegotiating. So as you know, this is a podcast where we like to dig into the stories of first generation people or their families. Tell us a little bit about your backstory, how your parents met, and how you ended up here in America.
Like, you know, it's really, I'm actually like an immigrant twice, right? Like I was born in Nigeria. I moved when I was 2 from Nigeria to Canada, and that's where I grew up. And then I lived all over the place. I lived in Korea for a very long time, but would never have considered myself Korean, but like had a whole life there. And then I moved to America and now I'm a citizen here. So I became, a citizen in 2 different places. And so I think people often are like, oh my gosh, like, the immigrant experience, but like, because I grew up in Canada, which is so similar to America in a lot of ways, they're like, oh, Canadian immigrant? Like, that's not really the same thing. Right. And then I'm like, oh, but from Nigeria. And I was like, yeah, but I moved when I was 2. They're like, oh, that's not the same thing. Like, it's like, I'm just not that thing. But, and then they also think like, oh, I'm Nigerian. So they're like, oh, you have like the Nigerian parents experience. And I was like, well, only one of my parents is from Nigeria. And my dad is a super progressive, like goes against all rules. He's not religious. He's just like a very different. So everyone, like my experience, I feel like is very like unique in that it's just, I relate to my brother because he had the exact same experience, but there's not even like, there's not the same sort of, I don't know, backstory I have as a lot of people because like my dad is a Nigerian man who spent his whole life in Nigeria. His whole family is still there. He's the only person who's ever left. He moved to Canada to do his master's degree, even though he had scholarships upon scholarships to go to like Oxford and all these like really prestigious schools. He really wanted to go to Canada. Had no money, so he applied to the University of Manitoba, which did not have an application fee, the only university, and went there. And my mom, who is from like a rural town in Manitoba of 190 people, and like all of her family are farmers, no one has ever gone to do university. She decided she wanted to go to university. She knew in her heart somewhere that some point she was supposed to live in some country in Africa. Like, I don't know why that was in her head. And she got scholarships and went to the University of Manitoba, and my parents met. My mom was 19. They 6 months after meeting got married.
Wow.
And then she moved to Nigeria for like a long time.
Wow. And she's just a Canadian woman.
Just a straight up Canadian woman, like blonde hair, white lady. Like, so it's just like this really weird thing. And they got married in 1973. So like that wasn't happening. Like my dad's family was not happy that this was happening. My mom's family was not happy this was happening. They like legit are sort of these examples of fighting against racism and like, all these like scared of other cultures and this idea that you shouldn't travel, that you shouldn't have kids elsewhere. My mom also and my dad both got their PhDs. So they're like very intelligent people, but like, so they're very progressive and they want like women and, people of different cultures and different backgrounds and all stuff to like, be equal. So it's just like this weird ass union that never, like that's not the typical pairing back then. And they've been married. They just celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary.
True love story.
Yeah. Like my parents are, unique and I respect them and all that they've gone through. And also, like, I'm very different from both of my parents in a lot of ways and very similar to both my parents in a lot of ways. But sometimes I think back to, like, my mom's struggle as, like, and, like, she's white. Like, she is a white lady. She's not like a tan, dark hair. Like, she is white. You know, and so back then where my dad's family lived, there was no internet. There was no, like, they didn't even have phones in their houses. They had to, like, you know, so they had legitimately never seen a white person. So when she came, my mom was like, it was really sad and depressing because the kids were terrified because they thought my mom was a ghost.
That's really funny.
And, like, it's very funny, right, to think about that. But, like, when I think about her experience, like, she barely knew my dad. She moved to this other country that her family was not supportive of. Her friends were not supportive of.
Right.
And then she gets there and everyone's, like, running away from her. Like, she's a monster. And I was like, damn. Like, I have issues with my mom. We've gone through a lot of stuff, but, like, you can't not respect that woman.
Right.
Like, that is a badass woman, you know?
I bet that also helps her relate to your dad and to you more as, you know, outsiders in the white world, now that she knows what it's like to be an outsider.
Yeah, you would think so. But it's very strange. My parents they, like, weirdly don't talk about race, which I think is bizarre, having gone through everything they've gone through.
Right. Loving versus Virginia was, like, not that long after, like, before they had gotten married.
Yeah.
Like, it had just...
So it's like a weird where they want to be sort of, like, sheltered from their own experience, it feels like at times. And I don't know if that's because of trauma and they just, you know, it's too much to deal with. And now they're like, you know, they're older. They don't need to dig into it necessarily and open Pandora's box and try and go through the therapy to get to the other side. Like, that's going to take too long, maybe.
I think our generation cares so much more about that. I feel the same. My parents, they never talk about it being outsiders. And I'm like, who will listen to my outsider story?
Right. All of our parents being immigrants, I don't think had the luxury of intellectualizing their existence and their experience in that same way. I'm not saying that anybody from our parents' generation doesn't do that and hasn't. Of course, there have been amazing scholars, poets, people who have taken the time to contemplate that. But I don't think it was de rigueur. I don't think it was something that people do as much as they do now, grappling with their identity.
They just had to get on with it. You know what I mean? Like, they had to survive. There were far less resources than what we have now. And, like, people just didn't care as much.
There was no TikTok.
That's the number one resource for, like, getting over everything.
For self-exploration.
Right? Is TikTok.
Hi, guys. Just wanted to hop on here for a quick moment about racism. And you're like, you're literally at a red light. Meanwhile, your parents have been together for 50 years. And they're like, we won't speak of it.
I know. I'm like, it's kind of, I mean, also now, like, you know, it is kind of funny that after everything my parents have been through and all the struggle and all the, like, they worked so hard when we were growing up because we, like, had no money. They were still in school. They were, like, working jobs and studying. And my brother is a radio personality and I am a comedian, actor.
And TV personality.
Yeah. But it's like, people are like, oh my God, they must be so annoyed. And I'm like, you would think. But they're super proud. They're, like,
That's
super
so
happy.
nice.
So they just, I think, wanted to get into a space where they had the resources to, like, let their kids do what made them happy, which is not the typical, I feel like, immigrant parent, you know, feeling. So it's pretty unique in that way. And I mean, lots of times I'm like, you know, there was a lot of stuff that wasn't great growing up and stuff, you know, but, like, when I look back, I think especially now being a parent, I'm like, oh man, like, the amount of sacrifice that they had to make and, like, the things that they gave up, the things that they worked hard for us to have, and then just, like, the ability to, like, let go of it all and let us do our things is kind of magical. Like, that's really, I think, the thing that I respect and, like, cherish the most for my parents' experience.
Are they artsy fartsy?
No, not at all. Like,
they got their PhDs in...
My dad has a PhD in engineering.
Oh my gosh, every single person on this show's dad is an engineer.
Except for mine, who was a doctor. The other one.
My dad, like, writes... He studies now cueing theory, and he, like, literally has multiple textbooks that people use as textbooks on cueing theory. So he's, like, this, like, top level mind in it. And in his spare time, he researches more queuing theory.
Like a queue in the British way, like a line you sit in. Okay, cool.
So they use it for like traffic lights. So like how do you move traffic? They use it for like telecommunications. Like how do you have enough data for everybody to be using it? Like it's like so many. They use it for like planning, city planning. Like where are people at different times and like these formulas.
That sounds like something if I was smart, I would be into.
I know it's really interesting and like useful.
Not in that way.
But yeah, it's very like you open up a textbook and it looks like a different language. So he's like, he loves that. And my mom was a microbiologist and she like legit loves it. Like she like in her spare time would love to look up things. Now they've both retired, but they're still like, my dad volunteers to like work with students at the universities and like gets taken around the world to like do this stuff with students.
So your mom was a microbiologist.
Yes.
Your dad still volunteers.
Yes.
Queuing theory is not the Canadian version of QAnon.
No. Although I feel like sometimes in their old age, my parents are becoming a lot more like weirdly... Well, my dad more so is like we had a conversation during the pandemic lockdown, and like my mom is a microbiologist who studies like, you know, disease and viruses and all these things. And he at one point goes like, but like, what is science, you know?
Oh no.
And I was like, what? And he goes, I'm not like an anti-vaxxer, but like, you know, how do they know? And I was like, are you like, what do you mean? He goes like, they can't experiment. And I was like, you mean like give people deathly viruses and see if things works? And he's like, yeah, I'm not saying they should. I just mean like nobody really knows, you know, it's always changing. And I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. Right. I don't. And my mom was like, yeah. I'm like, how can you be agreeing with him right now? And then she like turned it back into like what she really means, which is like, yeah, it does work. And we do know that it's just a different process.
The scientific method is us testing a series of hypotheses and it's all under revision. And you're like, okay, we're back in safe territory now. We've landed the plane.
It's like this weird yin yang they have with each other where they just like pull each other back into reality from wherever they are. And I think like they keep each other in check a little bit.
That's why they're still married, probably.
For real. I think it's like without each other, I'm not sure they could survive right now. So.
And they're in Toronto?
No, they're in Winnipeg in Canada.
Oh.
That's where I grew up.
Okay.
Right smack dab in the middle of the country, like above Fargo. Real cold in the winter time.
So you were born in Nigeria, moved, you spent some time in Korea.
Yeah.
How old were you when you were in Korea?
I was in Korea from when I was 23 until I was 28.
Oh, wow.
Do you speak any of the language?
No, I spoke a little bit when I was there, but I used to be a professional soccer player. Oh, I don't know if
plot thickens.
I feel like, I've done a lot of things.
You've had such an amazing life.
I know. It kind of sounds like I'm lying when I talk about all the jobs I've had, because I'm like, they're like, how old are you? But I played soccer in university. I used to play professionally in the W League, which no longer exists. And then I went to Korea for the World University Games and really enjoyed myself, and then went back to like my small town job in the middle of nowhere. And my friend came, and he had been living in China and was going to Korea, and he's like, you should just come over. You can teach English, you can play soccer, you can play Gaelic football. And I legit was like, yeah, okay, cool. And I like gave my notice for my salaried job and like moved across the world. And I played soccer in a men's league, and then was the only woman who had ever played.
What?
Wow.
And then
did you have to wear like a mustache? And
no, you know what's funny is like they were just like, wait a minute, is this even allowed? And there was no rule against it, so they let it happen.
Oh my God, you're Airbud. There's nothing in the rule book that says it.
I was a dog, but yeah. And then I like represented Korea in the Asian Gaelic Games, playing Gaelic football, very bizarre, and taught English. Taught kindy, taught old like businessmen, and then worked for a publishing company writing English like books.
I can't.
And then left.
There's nothing in the rule book that says that a Nigerian, Canadian can't represent Korea
in the Asian Gaelic Games, and in like it's just bizarre.
Was there like a cultural hurdle when you first got there, or did you feel like you stood out? I mean,
yes, 100%. Like Korea is very interesting. Where I think having grown up in Canada, where Canada is such like being Canadian, the only real Canadian people are Indigenous people. So like, but that's not what like when people talk about it, they mean like everybody in Canada, and they're like we're welcoming and like all this kind of stuff, right? But like, there's no Canadian like look or. You know, there's some Canadian culture, I guess, but like it's not like a multiple thousands year old country. Whereas when you go to Korea, it's very like you're not Korean by bloodline, by like having like you, even if you lived there your whole life and you spoke Korean and everything, if you're not Korean, you're not Korean, and you never will be. But like, there's something beautiful in that where they're super hospitable. They were super welcoming. They were like, wonderful. There's just like this barrier where I'm like, I would never want to live here for life because I want to like feel like I am that thing. And even like, you know, they'll be like, oh, that person's half Japanese. They're not Korean. Like, it's like very, you know, but I loved Korea. Like, I had a blast in Korea. I still to this day, like, Korean food is one of my soul like foods. If I'm like hungover or sick, I want, soul foods. But yeah, it was great. I loved my time there. And then I just left it all and was like, I'm going to travel for a bit and I'm going to take some French courses in France and then I'm going to figure out what I want to do. But yeah, I've been like a wandering minstrel, I think, for life until I started like really doing like comedy and acting is like the first time where this is the longest I've ever done anything is what I'm doing now.
And it's a job that's notoriously wandering and minstrelly.
Right. Yeah. And then now having kids, it's like an essence of like who I am is like not taken away, but it's just like I've shifted, you know, into this other. I can't just be like, oh, I'm going to move to Korea next week. You know, I can't do those things. So it's a very interesting like metamorphosis constantly for me into like who I am and who I thought I was. That's no longer like letting go of that version and like being in the now, which has been like wonderful and like painful and hard. But like kind of inspiring and exciting at the same time. You know, certain days you'll call me and I'll be like, oh, things are not going well. But then like other times it's like, wow, like this is kind of when you just sit in like where you are, there's like so much power in that. It's just so hard to do.
Right.
Because you want something in the future or you used to be this or whatever, right? Like,
right.
I have a hard time sitting still, being alone. And I think a lot of us comedians were like, well, if we're always out and we're always moving, we never have to be alone with our thoughts.
Yes.
That's when the creepy thoughts come in.
And then like, did the pandemic like screw that all up for you? Like, was it, I feel like a lot of people, like I had just gotten married and I had my first kid and then I had my second kid during the pandemic. So I was kind of like, for people who were single and like living alone, I was like, oh man, this must be either like the best thing ever for them where they don't have to do anything or see anybody, or like the worst. I feel like there was no like in between for people, where one of my good friends, he was just like, I went through a time. Like he was like ordering weird shit and then like, you know, like he was just like, I don't know, I like lost my mind, you know? Because it's like, we do need to have this, we need to have the ability, I think, to like have connection, and we're already like making our connection more and more like our phones or whatever. So, but then when the option gets taken away, it's like this weird loss of control. Right. And like you kind of lose your mind a little bit, I think.
My boyfriend and I had the exact opposite experience because I'm a super extrovert and it was just devastating for me. And he's a super introvert and he was like, this is my best life. Yeah. He was like, you're trapped here with me. And he had like such an artistic, fruitful experience. And I was like, must be nice. Well, my career just goes down the drain.
Yeah, it's like I mean, I must say I was on the side of like, I thought I was going to hate it and go like, you know, but I was on bed rest for my second pregnancy for like 4 months, and that was really depressing and really hard. But like, it was kind of comforting that everything was closed.
Right.
Because I was like, at least I know I'm not missing out on like everything.
You're
and I
not
could still
falling behind on anything.
Yeah. Like I could still do shows. They were all happening on Zoom. I was just in bed.
Right.
So like, that was one thing that I was like, that was kind of a saving grace for me almost in that time.
A really good time to have babies or get plastic surgery.
Yeah. Oh, I wish.
I should have. I really regret that.
Yeah. Let's all take a time machine. We won't change history, just our faces.
Yeah. We just show up and we're like, super.
Hello, I just did a lot of exercise, a lot of at-home
Sorry,
workouts.
my boobs are hitting the microphone right now.
Amazing.
Crazy.
So wait, when you moved back from Korea to Canada, you started working in entertainment there?
Well, first I, not right away. I worked as a wedding planner for a couple
One
of
of
years.
your 8,000 jobs.
I know. It's crazy. Now I'm going to the show tonight we have that's like a wedding themed show, and I'm like, oh, this is bringing back so many memories. But I worked as a wedding planner, and then I was a certified professional life coach. I still am a certified professional life coach, but I practiced as one for years. And then I got into hosting this online lifestyle channel.
Wow.
And then kind of from there started doing acting and comedy and stuff. And like, it just kind of took off. I never, ever thought I wanted to do this. Like, it just wasn't a thing in my world to think like that was something for me. And And yeah, it's bizarre how the thing that is the most like fleeting, the job that is the most fleeting and has the least security is the thing that I've been doing the longest, has made me the most money, and has been the thing that's like made me feel like secure and like I have a career.
Because it's what you're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I guess so. You cut to like 5 years from now, I'm like, I'm a professional chef now. This is what I should be doing. But like, I think that part of it is like this, I have never had like a real job, you know? So I've never had this thing of like, I have to stick with this. I have to keep going. I've always just been like, okay, I can do whatever. So that's what I think makes me feel like this is right. Cause I haven't leapt and gone to some other thing yet. Mm-hmm. And it's been like 13 years. So that's crazy.
What was your first stand-up experience like? Like how did you jump into that?
Through my acting class that I was taking in Winnipeg, had this opportunity to like, they're like, try stand-up. It's something new for your toolbox. And I was like coming off of being a professional life coach. I was like, I really need to get outside my comfort zone. I need to do something different and really shake it up, right? Like do the thing that scares you. Yes, totally. And then I was like, I'm going to try it. And then I like did this, you know, this 5-minute set or whatever it was to a very warm room of all of our friends and family who were just there to laugh and support. And then someone offered me like another show. They're like, oh, that was good. Like you should come do my show. And I was like, okay. And then it was just this thing that I was like, yeah, I guess I do it sometimes. And then someone was like, oh, you're that comedian. And I was like, what? No, I'm not. What are you talking about? They're like, I've seen you do multiple shows. Like you're a comedian. I was like, oh, okay. So it was like, it just kind of, I fell backwards into it being like, oh, I guess I am. And then I started like actively doing it. Love that. Yeah. But yeah, it's very bizarre. Cause like I had never gone to a stand-up comedy show. I think before I started doing stand-up comedy, which is just, I feel like an imposter sometimes where I talk to people and they've always wanted to be a stand-up and they've watched all these different specials, listened to all these different albums. And I'm like, who's that? What's that joke? Right. Like, I'm like, I have no history of stand-up, like, you know, in my life, but I don't know. I make people laugh. So I guess that's like all that counts in the moment, but
really is. Yeah. It doesn't really matter. I don't care how many times you've watched George Carlin's anything. Yeah. There are a lot of people who are fans first and then comedians second.
Yeah.
But I mean, whatever. Everyone's obviously on their own path. But yeah, what a cool testament to your flexibility and how multi-talented you are. And also your parents, you know, for
not disowning me along the way.
I mean, you kind of trained them to accept that you were going to change careers every few years.
I think they're just like, they were so happy when like I've been doing this for a long time. They're like, oh, finally, she's found something. And then like I got married and they're like, oh my goodness, finally, she's found something. They're just like, they're so happy right now that like Aww. I have like a family and like I have a career but I think it's true. Like I had never lived in a place for longer than 1 year. And that changed, you know, not that long ago, really. So I think for them, it was always a little bit of like worry and a little bit of apprehension. And some of the people I dated, like, fair enough.
Some of the people we all dated.
Yeah. So it's nice. And it's not something I ever thought I wanted, right? Like I never knew I wanted to be a comedian. Never thought I wanted to be an actor. I actively did not want to get married. Didn't think I wanted to have kids. And now all those things. And I'm like, this is bliss. This is the best. It's the most wonderful. Yeah, it's hard at times, but like, it's the most wonderful thing. My kids are like, I always tell my husband, I'm like, it's just so weird. It's like they were made for us. And he's like, you're such an idiot. He's like, of course they were. They're made from us. And I was like, I know. But like, they're the coolest. Like, I'm just like, they're like my people. And he's like, Aww. Yeah. I'm like, I don't have to like return them to their parents ever. I'm like, I am the parent. It's mind blowing, you know? So, I'm
so
just
lovely
happy
to hear. I feel like there are a few people who describe their relationship with their kids in such a lovely way.
The beauty of like motherhood is not always in the moment of motherhood. It's in the memory of motherhood. So it's like, you know, sometimes it's really hard in the moment because you're not sleeping or your kids are being so difficult or whatever. You can't go out and do the things you want to do, blah, blah, blah. But then like, no matter how hard it's been, the end of the night, I'm like just scrolling through pictures of my kids. That's like all I want to do and look at videos of them. When I'm away, I just went to Switzerland for a comedy festival. And like on the plane, there was turbulence. And I was like, oh my God, what if this goes down? I need to look at pictures of my kids. I need to like call them and tell them. Like it was like all about like, I just wanted like my kids to know I love them. I want to be around my kids. I want to see pictures of my kids. It was like that thing of, it is amazing. Sometimes it's hard in the moment, but like then they look at you and they're like, Mom, I love you. And I'm like, oh my God, okay, this is the best thing in my life. Like, it's just like, it's so wild.
I have to ask, because you're the first, I think, parent we've had on this show. How is it juggling this career with
There
children?
is no juggling. It's a lot of like dropping balls. I have mom brain. Like, it's a real thing that happens where like you just have, it's like overload of things to like think about and remember and do. I'm also trying to be a respectful parent, which means like it's a harder route than just, you know, how our parents like, you know, spanked you or whatever. Like, it's just a much more being patient. And I always laugh because I'm like, we had all this like, I don't know, I don't want to call it like violence and stuff, but we had all that stuff like put into us, and there's like no outlet for that because I'm not going to give that to my kids. So
that's
it's like
what comedy's for, Aisha.
I mean, I want a rage room is what I want. Yeah. But like, there's just nowhere to put it. So it's like, you know, I always feel like I'm failing at everything. I always feel like I'm failing as a mom. I could always do better. I feel like I'm always failing in my career. I always feel like I'm failing as a wife. I'm like, I'm not looking after my body enough. I'm not connecting with my friends enough. Like, there is just not enough time for all the things that like I want to do, never mind the things that I should do or I'm supposed to do. So I have come to this place where I'm like, you know, I have to really enjoy the little things, because that's when I'm like, oh, I did something good. Like I had a great show, or I was a very patient mom, or my husband and I got to go on a date and it was really fun or whatever. But like, yeah, I'm constantly feeling like I'm failing, which isn't the end of the world. Like, I did a TED Talk on how failure is kind of the place where you like actually get the most out of life, because you're constantly like learning and evolving, and that's what you want, right? Like, you want to be evolving. You don't want to just do what you did yesterday because you did it yesterday. Yeah, but it's tough. It sucks to feel like you're failing.
What looks like failure to you, though, I'm seeing as having it all.
Right.
So
I know people say that, and I'm like, it's so interesting, like the different perspectives.
You can also not have any of those things and feel like you're failing, like me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like this interest, like it's your own, it's really what's important is like having people tell you that, because you're like, oh yeah, I am doing well. Like sometimes when I do podcasts and people give the intro, I'm like, damn, she sounds amazing. And I'm like, oh, that's me, you know? So that's a wonderful thing. And then like I did this thing with my friend Coco in Toronto where she was feeling that and I was feeling that, and I was like, we need to make a wall of yays, where like you go back through your last month or couple months or whatever it is, or the whole year, and you put on sticky notes like all the things that you're just like proud of, like little tiny things you accomplished or big things, and then you put those all up on a wall, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh damn, I have a whole wall of yays. Now, because you don't recognize it on the day-to-day, so you just feel bogged down with the things that you didn't do or you didn't succeed at or whatever. But like it's that whole thing of like when you are grateful or you have like gratitude, you find more things to be grateful and have gratitude for, and then like you become luckier because have a different, perspective on life.
I feel like Christy needs a wall of yays. I feel like you have a wall of nays right now.
It's true.
I say this with all the love in my heart.
I feel like, do you ever worry that like your motivation will wane or you won't? I feel like unless I'm always looking forward at like what I'm working towards, I am not going to gain clarity or get any closer to what I want if I don't define it first. Yeah. But then in the act of definition, you necessarily create a gap between what you have and what you want, which causes
I think it's important to have, for me anyway, like I'm very much a goal-oriented person. I feel very like settled and calm when I have something to work toward. I think part of that is like why I became a life coach, because then it's like everything's clear. Like you can move. That's what I'm thinking too. But like there's also this beauty in like you also need to like balance that with like the here and now, and that whole idea of like Buddhism of being present and being here. Like you're missing life if you're not in the moment as well. So it's like, what do I want? And like checking up and then being like, great, I have my goal, and that changes from like week to week or day to day slightly. I want to like make my adjustments, and then I'm going to like come back to the here and now and just be here with what's happening and like have grace for myself that like some days are hard and some days are easy and some days are fun and some days are challenging. And I remember watching this, I can't remember who posted it, but this wonderful video of this woman who was like, like you work so hard for your goal. You work so hard and then you get there. Can we just take a moment? Why do we always have to be moving towards something? Can we just take a moment and be in that goal? Like we just did this. And so like sometimes for me, even like when I have nothing to do during the day, I'm like, oh, I gotta like find new shows. I gotta do this. And I'm like, wait a minute. The whole joy of being an entertainer is that we don't have a 9 to 5. We're not bound by like this like boss who makes us come into work or something. And so like the benefit is the thing I was like shaming myself for, which was just bizarre. I'm like, I have the ability to take a nap if I'm feeling crappy and I need that, but I feel guilt about that. I'm like, well, then why don't I just go work a 9 to 5 job where I can't take a nap and I can have a, salary, but I don't feel creatively, fulfilled. So it's like having that ability to like look forward, have your goal, make sure you're tweaking it along the way, but then like being in the now. And when you get to the goal, like celebrating like a mad person, like just going fucking nuts, like that you did it. Or that you changed your mind and you don't want that thing anymore. And now you're in a new direction. You're like, I got a new goal. Let's celebrate that. Like, I think being a mom and having kids has helped me with that. Cause it's like, oh my gosh, you put your shoe on by yourself. That's amazing. Like the little things are so important for adults too. Cause I think we can learn a lot from just like looking at like kids, not being like living the life through filters of like should, do's or shame or all these different things.
Not expecting a child to be productive. Like, what did you do today?
Right?
Child.
And like, you don't have to work hard to earn like love and care and rest. Like, we would never be like, you didn't do all the ABCs today? You didn't get to sleep? You better stay up until 4 a.m. Like, it's just like, it's crazy. Like, and kids are the, the healthiest versions of ourselves. And then as we get older, like all of a sudden you can't, move your body as you used to. You can't like, we have anxiety or whatever, like these things like, I think that's really, that's from nurture a lot of the time. Not all the time, obviously, but like that's from nurture a lot of the time.
And that must be why they're so creatively free, because they aren't putting these pressures on themselves.
Yeah.
So they're weird and funny.
It's amazing. They're just weirdos. Kids are so weird. Sometimes I'm like, I want to be inside that brain, baby. Like that is just the weirdest thing to say, but I love it, and I wish I could let my like freak flag fly like my kids do sometimes.
Sounds like it's time to do mushrooms with your children.
Yeah. I mean, maybe if I did mushrooms, I would be on the same level as them because they're like kids are like on natural mushrooms of just childhood,
It's true.
It's bizarre.
I've heard people say that that's the advantage, is that it does break down certain indoctrinations and all that stuff. And that's really what we're talking about, is the more you're an adult, the more you're programmed by capitalism and socialization and all the things that kind of strip you of the access to your most honest self. And like traditions and culture and things that like some things you resonate with and some things you don't, but you feel like bound by them in a certain way. Like it's weird how like there's this idea of tradition. We have to do this because it's been done before and that's how we always do it. And you're like, but what if that really doesn't resonate with me? Like, is it okay? Right. Like, why do I have to like do this thing for people who sure are part of my ancestry, but like we're here and now, like, can we shift that? I mean, I don't know. That actually segues to one of the questions I was curious about for you is, since you've been moving around so much and you have such a interesting relationship to many different countries and cultures, are there any customs or cultures that you feel like you draw very heavily from? Or alternatively, are there customs that you feel like are ingrained in you that you're kind of trying to shake? I mean, I think that one, which is very Nigerian, is like you just don't, if someone offers you something, you take it. I think there's something in that where like, I never show up empty-handed if I can. It really pains me to show up to someone's house empty-handed. Yes. Which I think is in a lot of cultures, like you show up with something, right? But like when people come to me and want to give me something, my instinct, I think, which is very like put upon, is like, oh, no, you shouldn't have, I can't accept like all of this stuff, even though like I would do that. Right. But like in Nigeria, there's this whole idea that like if someone offers you something, you say yes. It's rude. It's really disrespectful to say no. And so I've been trying to like take that on, whether it's like someone offers me a compliment or someone offers me money or someone offers me, it's like I can take it and then I can, if I want, give them something too, right? Yeah. But like the act of like accepting and receiving is like really not, it's not commonly celebrated. It's like, oh, you're going to accept that? You're just going to take that? Like, it's like, why do we always have to be giving and like this thing? Like, why can't we also be accepting? So like accepting love, right? Like that's really hard for me. Or somebody offers help. Do you need any help? Like, no, I don't need any help. It's a way of saying, woman. I don't need you. I don't want you. Or what you have to offer is not of use to me.
And
Sorry,
you're
I
like
cut
being
you off.
isolated though, right? Like I did that for ages and I was like, how come no one wants to like come and help me? How come I have no one to call when I need something? And it's because I pushed everyone away and didn't accept help. And now I'm like in this practice of trying to consistently receive and have open arms. And like, even if someone offers me something I don't like or I don't want, I'll often be like, great, thank you. And then I can like, my rule is when you give someone something, they can do whatever they want with it. They can throw it away. They can give it away. They can use it. They can love it. They can hate it, whatever. But like, it's the act of receiving that I'm trying to like work on being better at because I'm not great at it.
That's so interesting that you feel this urge to give, but then you don't feel the urge to receive.
Yeah. I think that's like partially a woman thing where we're supposed to always be giving and you should never need something. You shouldn't be needy.
Right.
Right? Like it's like this
Very
weird
individualistic of like, we're all just supposed to be doing it for ourselves.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge feature of capitalism is we're just trying to deny the interdependence and, you know, it takes a village to raise a child. No, everyone has to have their own childcare and their own everything. And no, you shouldn't live with your family. Everyone needs to have their own apartment and pay their own electric bill and their own this and their own that because the economy.
Yeah, it's nuts, right? Like, I don't know. There's it's just a bizarre movement, and I think part of it is like people talk about this for feminism, where they're like, you know, it used to be that you gave, but like you received, right? Like someone took care of you. And that was wrapped up a lot in this like men are dominant and have power and women don't. And so I think that whenever you receive, it like kind of reverts people back to that, like that it's a gender thing or there's a power dynamic or something that like you're being taken care of, you don't have the power. And I'm like, even with my husband who's wonderful and, you know, when he pays for stuff, I'm like, yay. And also I can do this. Like, you know, like that's that weird push pull. I have a hard time being taken care of, but it makes my life a lot easier to be taken care of. But I feel a lot of shame about it. But like, I want to take care of him. But when he offers to take care of me, I'm like, I can do that. It's fine. Like, it's just this weird, I want to be an independent woman, but I also want to break the like, I want to break down patriarchy. I want to break down like all these things. Right. And somehow we've been trained to think that means we got to do it all on our own. And that's just a big pile of bullshit. Because the real rebellion is like becoming a community and you having unity. Well, so that's what I think.
My favorite answer we've ever.
Yeah, that's a really beautiful way of putting that. That it's just as feminist to ask for help. I remember when I started comedy, I was like, I was telling a female comic who I really respect. I was like, I'm not going to ask for spots, and she was like, as a feminist, you absolutely have to ask for spots. She was like, because if you don't, then you're not putting yourself out there and you're, you know, giving into the patriarchy. And she said she gets all these booking emails from men. And when she gets one from a woman, she's so excited. So that if there's any female comics listening to this, submit.
Anybody, closed mouths, don't get fed.
Listening to this.
Which they are verifiably not. Demonstrably not.
Okay, so the ancient Egyptians were often buried with treasures or worldly items. If you had to pick one item, what would you take into your sarcophagus?
So when I read this, I was like, oh my gosh. Like I remember thinking about people who wanted to be buried with other people. Oh, you know, who were like still alive, which is weird.
Oh, yes.
Right. Like you want to like, and I was like, I would selfishly want to like be buried with my children, which is like the most morbid thing anyone can ever say. And
hello, Freud. Please hold.
One of my kids been talking a lot about death, and he said to me the other day, he's like, Mom, will you dig up my bones when I'm dead? And I was like, what? And he's like, will you dig my bones? Will you go find my bones? And I was like, well, first of all, you're not going to die for a long time. And probably I'm going to die before you. And he's like, what? And I was like, oh my God, what am I talking about? And I was like, and then I said to him, and my husband's like, what are you saying to him? I was like, no, we're all going to die at the exact same time. And I was like, what am I saying? Like, I was like so loopy. And I was
so
like, you know.
funny. And you're like, oh, fuck. I'm making a lot of promises right now.
Yes, like this is rough. And I had an obsession with death when I was a child. And I was like obsessed with death. I wanted to know what happens when you die. I wanted to know when people were going to die. Like I was very worried everyone was going to die. So I'm very like triggered by it. I think when my kids talk about it and I'm trying to talk about how like most people live a long life and then they die. And sometimes that doesn't happen, but people get sick sometimes and you go to the doctor. Like I'm like trying to explain like all these different variations. And he's like, will you dig up my bones? You know? And I was like, oh.
Wow.
But I think like honestly, and it's such a dumb like 2023 answer. I was like, I also have a big fear of being like, one of my biggest nightmares is being buried alive. And I often told my mom I want her to chop up my body and throw it in the ocean. And she's like, that's 100% illegal. I'm not doing that. But I was like, I'm so scared of being put in a coffin and then waking up and being like, it's like thinking about it now, like makes me like sweat.
Okay. I have to ask, how much of this fear is, I don't know if they would have had this in America, but when I was growing up, maybe you remember this, there's this long Days of Our Lives saga about this woman who was buried alive, and she had some kind of like walkie-talkie or something, and she could like talk to me. Okay, just me.
Oh my gosh.
But I never had that fear. And then it was like one summer that was like, we were off of school, and that was like the through line of Days of Our Lives. And I watched every single episode.
Somebody got buried alive. Okay.
She got out at the end.
Whew. Yay, because that's the only way it could have ended. If she like died in there, that would have been the most tragic end to something. I just am like, it's terrifying to me to think about being, I'm not like claustrophobic necessarily, but like when I think about being in a small space, it's game over. Like it's like I might as well be jumping off a cliff. But having said that, what I would want to be buried with if I was in like
my son's bones.
Right, yeah. I'm gonna dig them up. Is my all of my pictures of my family and like my kids and stuff, because that's the thing. I was like, if I did happen to wake up in a coffin and I was buried alive, at least I would have the comfort of looking at my children. And
just a couple of Sudoku puzzles. Yeah. Something to do.
I'm starting to think I need to have children, so I'm not just looking at my own Instagram photos.
Like all your exes.
Bury me with my phone.
Yeah, I think that's really the joy of kids, is you can be in your sarcophagus looking at their pictures.
Oh, that's so sweet and slightly morbid to think about, but that's what we love doing here in this podcast, is asking people the deep questions, which brings us to our final segment called Dig Deep. We have 2 questions. So Elizabeth Taylor famously portrayed Cleopatra in the 1963 film. If your life were a crossover of 2 films or TV shows, what would they be and who would play you?
Okay, so who would play me is the first one, right? Obviously, I want someone who's amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's true at all, but 2 people in my life have told me that I remind them of Gabrielle Union.
Oh, yeah, you do have a vibe.
And the place I got my bridal dress for my wedding, they told me that Gabrielle Union came in and also tried on one of the dresses that I tried on. So I was like, am I like Gabrielle Union? So I feel like it would have to be her.
Okay.
Or is Gabrielle Union you?
100% the other way around.
She's to which so, your replies, say it with me, bring it on. Okay.
Thank you. So I would definitely want it to be her. But I was thinking about this because I was like, I don't know. Like I have such bad recall, like memory. But I was like, I think that part of it would have to be that like one part would be In Living Color, the wonderful sketch TV show from the 90s. Because I feel like my life is like very like, you know, it's start and stop. Like there's a lot of segments to it and they're not all connected, right? But it's like fun and funny. And then the other part, I think more recently, would be like a Breaking Bad, where like, I don't know what the heck is going on. And I'm like in this dangerous place, but I'm trying to do the good thing. And I always feel a little bit like everything could blow up in my face.
Wow.
So it's a little mix of those 2 things. And I don't know if that really gives a good picture.
No, that absolutely does. Okay. Actually, you took it to like a metaphorical level of like the structure and the vibe instead of like a plot.
Yeah.
Usually we get like thematic like or plot answers, but that's so interesting to think, yeah, you've had many acts and I'm sure many more to come.
Yeah. And every day is different, and some days it's hilarious and some days it's weird and some days it's offensive, and like, you know, it's just, and I also loved In Living Color because I had Fly Girls. So like you can't beat that as part of your life story, you know. But
I'd watch it.
Me too, right?
Yeah, go get that WGA registration on it quick. Go patent that.
I'm going to lock in Gabrielle Union for that for sure.
She listens to this podcast, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She's our number
Gabby,
one.
if you're listening, yeah.
Okay, so Cleopatra left a storied legacy as a queen, scientist, and scholar. What do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to be remembered for? And also, or alternatively, what will your epitaph read?
Okay, this is a big question.
Yeah.
So your epitaph is just photos of your children.
Yeah. I think that, like, talking about legacy, I think before it's like a pre-birthing of my children and like a post-birthing of my children, right. Where like, I think I've always been, one of the things I had to do when I was like training to be a life coach was basically like boil down everything in my life to figure out what my core value was. And I remember I did all this work and all these exercises and stuff, and my core value came out as fun. And I was like, oh, fabulous. Like, that's great. And then we had to like go up and like present what our core value was in front of people. And everyone before me was like, family. Family is so important. And the next person's like, honesty. And then like all these like really deep things. And I was like, my core value is fun. And I like had all this like weird like embarrassment about that. And everyone in the class is like, yeah, obviously. Like, you create fun, you want people to have fun, you want the world to be fun, and like that is through like a lot of different like avenues and different things that I was doing at the time. And I think like even when I started my business plan for my life coaching, like I would go into these like stuffy rooms with like these, white dudes in suits, and they'd be like, what's your business about? And I'd be like, well, I think it's really important for everyone. I'd be like in there, I'd have like woos and yays and stuff. Yeah. And they're like, you can't do that. And I was like, yeah, but I want people to know what like kind of business they're interacting with. Like, it's me, and this is how the business is. And they're like, you're never going to succeed. You need a contract. You need like cancellation policy where they owe you money if they want to change. And I was like, I don't want people to feel stuck with me. Like, I was very like, hippy dippy about it. But like, it was when I started like leaning into that stuff where like I had the most success and made the most money, and like people really knew who I was, and like things took off for me. So I think like fun is like an essence of like who I am and like the things that I provide for the world. And then I think now that I'm a mom, there's like some like flame inside of me that has like been ignited again about like authenticity. So it's like equality, being like authentically equal for people, and not this like bullshit like we're gonna put up a face of like women and men are making the same money but they're really not, or like we're hiring people like diversity but they're really not, and like all these things. Like, I'm like, that for me it's just equality and like authenticity of like being honest and truthful, making sure that like people have opportunity. Like, I'm like, it's fucking nuts to me that like some people make so much money and they're not helping anybody, and like people are like struggling and they're trying to help everybody else. Like, how is this a world where we're so out of balance? And I think just like being a woman of color, a person who identifies as queer, that like all of my life I have been the odd one out. Like, I played in a men's league as a woman. I like was a drummer with all these dudes, and like, now when I started stand up, it was all guys. Like, it was just like, I've always sort of stood out and been like the one who's different. And so I feel like I've been able to easily fight for those things a lot of the time, but that's not the case for most people, I think, around the world. So like finding ways to like make that accessible for people to do, and for other people who aren't doing it to understand and open up and allow to happen. And so it's like a very broad, I think, thing. Like, that's what I want my legacy to be, that like I created fun and I made opportunities for people to like stand up and be authentic and have their voice heard, that are not necessarily, who are just not straight white men, like, from America, like that whole sort of, power standard. So, yeah. And also, all I really want when it comes down to it in life is like for my kids to want to hang out with me when I'm older. Like, I just want them to like be like, hey, I'm going to come over for dinner, and like walk in the front door.
I always think about one of the reasons I would really fear motherhood is I think the part where they grow up and move on would just devastate me.
My kids are 4 and 2, and I'm like, sometimes I talk to my husband, I'm like, but one day they're going to leave. And he's like, they're not even in school yet. Like, he's like, you have a long time to get used to this. I'm like, I don't. I'm like, I need them to move next door. I need to like buy the house next door so they can live next door. And then the other day my son went, Mom, I'm going to live here for the rest of my life. And I was like, yes.
And you're like, just please sign this contract right here.
Right? I was like, promise me. And then you're going to, and I said, are you going to, you and your sister going to get a place? He's like, yeah, we'll have sleepovers. And she was like, yeah. I was like, this is the best. Like, it was the best. So really, yeah, above all else, I want my kids to like be great, feel free and feel authentic and have fun, and to like me.
Well, that's a very, very easy job because you're brilliant and wonderful. And I could talk to you for several hours. And I have before. And that's why, last time I saw you, we were like, oh my gosh, 3 hours have passed and we didn't even realize it.
And it was brilliant.
Every guest brings very different energy, and I will say you brought a lot of fun.
Oh, good.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. I'm already doing it.
You're amazing. Where can people find you, and what would you like to promote?
It's just at Aisha Alfa. My website's aishaalfa.com. So you can find me there to see like shows and events that I'm doing. I also co-host a podcast with Jonathan Giles called A Work in Progress, because we are really stepping into being works in progress. And then of course I just came off of being on season 1 of Based on a True Story on Peacock. And I think I can say that now.
And
that
you're
we
brilliant
are
on it.
ratifying. Thank you. We're ratifying this strike, so I think I'm allowed to say that.
Yes.
I think so.
We're in good territory now.
So, and that was probably one of my favorite jobs I've had so far. So please check it out. I think there's going to be a season 2. We'll see if I'm in it. Cross your fingers.
Yes, yeah. I'll hope that for you.
I'll charge all my crystals for you.
Yes, please. Ooh, please.
Aisha Alfa, she is above all things fun, and you should follow her. And we are going to have you back for part 2 because we didn't even get into half of the questions, but we can't thank you enough. You're a ray of sunshine.
Thank you.
And if you want to know more, we have links to her in the show notes. And until then, thank you for joining us. I've been Christy Bonna.
I'm Lynn Molly.
And I'm Aisha Alfa.
This has been Cleopatra. Goodbye.
Bye.